Hey guys, what's up? Abby here, and welcome to my 8.2 Frost DK guide. Now, this is a long time coming, and I'm sorry it's so late. I've been working on this piece by piece ever since we've really gotten the resources available to do this guide about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. But I am finally able to put this guide out, and I hope you guys enjoy it and find it very useful. I'm going to put a timestamp for each section on the screen right now so you can easily reference a certain section if that's all you need. And I hope you guys enjoy the video. So as you saw, the first section of the video is going to be about enchants and stats. So when I talk about enchants, I'm going to get right into the weapon enchants. So when it comes to weapon enchants, it's going to be like it always has been. It's going to be Razor Ice on your main hand and Fallen Crusader on your offhand. Now, if you're new to Frost DK and don't know why that's always recommended everywhere, I'm going to quickly explain why. So Frost Scythe only uses your main hand. So when you have Razor Ice on your main hand, it's going to spread Razor Ice when you use Frost Scythe to all targets that it hits. If Razor Ice is on your offhand and Fallen Crusader is on your main hand, Frost Scythe won't do that. So might as well just put Razor Ice on your main hand so you never have to worry about that. And that's really that. So if you ever had that burning question, there you go. That's the reason why. Now, when it comes to your stats, right on the screen now, you see a website called RaidBots. This is the best website ever for finding out what gems you want, what enchants you want on your gear, all that stuff. So how you use this website is simply you're going to click Top Gear, and then you're going to scroll down and click Replace Existing Gems or Enchants, and just check all of the gems and enchants to find out what you should be running, what gems you put in each gear slot, what enchants you put on your rings. That's how you do it. So make sure to do that instead of just checking your stat weights with the stat weight sim. The reason that's not the most effective thing is because let's say you sim your stat weights and you find out that Verse is your best stat or Mastery is your best stat, and you just put a bunch of Mastery or Verse gems in your gear. What happens if after the third gem, your stat weights change, so Crit is now your best stat? Well, Top Gear helps you find out what is actually the best for each individual slot because it sims all the iterations. And that's definitely the best way to find out what gems and enchants you should be running on your gear besides the weapon ones. So the next section is about Azurite Traits. Now, when it comes to Azurite Traits in this raid, they're pretty interesting, actually. We have some of the neutral traits coming in being very strong. In fact, the Cathraxi shoulders are the best shoulders and have swirling sands on them. I'll put that on the screen right now and explain how it works. Swirling sand is the crit proc one that whenever you get a crit, it extends the duration of it by 1 second up to a maximum of 18 seconds. It's a lot of crit as well. It's really, really strong. And those shoulders are actually the best, also because the other traits on it are really good too. But it's kind of cool that a neutral trait is so strong because that's something that we had as a problem at the beginning of the expansion, but it hasn't been much of a problem since then, except for Treacherous Covenant being so ridiculously good in the last year. But that was kind of a raid-specific trait, and it's still really good, but you can't really get very high Azurite with Treacherous Covenant on it. Now, Undulating Tides, the thing about this trait is it sims really high, and it seems really good. But if you're ever on a boss that is going to hit you below 50% at any point, let's say the boss is not on Mega Farm, you're doing Ashvane prog, or Zakul prog, or any of those bosses really that can really hit the raid down pretty hard. Below 50% Ashvane, it's the 3 bubbles and your raid's going below 50%. You really don't want to run this trait. Yeah, the Absorb seems good too, but if you're proccing that Absorb, you're not doing DPS with Undulating Tides for 45 seconds. And I personally think that's a trap trait. I know a lot of other people think too. It looks great on Sims, but it doesn't perform as well as it Sims. Now, the other traits that are really good are Icy Citadel as a Frost-specific trait. Frozen Tempest is really good as well. Those are traits that just perform really, really good. Icy Citadel does change up the rotation a bit depending on how many you have. And all in all, it's really strong because your breath now is lasting longer than your pillar by a fairly significant amount. So being able to buff your breath after your pillar is very valuable. And you can get some decent extends on this Icy Citadel, especially during Bloodlust. Now, Frozen Tempest, it's always an amazing trait to have one of, especially in Mythic Plus scenarios. And any scenario where you can really get the free rhyme proc, and that's bosses like Zakul or Gazoa, bosses that you're able to have 3 targets on. Even Queen's Court at some point, if you're switching bosses, you're able to proc it off one of the little exploding orbs. Other bosses, this is doable. Radiance of Azura, for example, but it really shines in Mythic Plus whenever you're running to a trash pack and you pop your Remorseless Winter and you get a free rhyme proc. It's a lot of damage, so very strong trait, and especially now with Gathering Storm being such a strong option and actually being the go-to option instead of Frostworm's Fury, this trait has gained some strength because of that. So a really powerful choice. But all in all, I'd say to sim yourself, find out what traits are the best for you, and use Raidbot's drop itemizer too to find out what you should really be going for in terms of coining, in terms of the Azurite vendor, all of that. In terms of maybe running a Benthic Azurite piece, sim yourself. That is the greatest advice I can possibly give. Now we have the essences, the new system in patch 8.2, and an interactive system, kind of. Now, when it comes to your essences, it's pretty simple what essences you want to pick. It goes for really all the Frost DKs out there, and the best essence, it's really the same for everyone, actually. That's Condensed Life Force. Condensed Life Force is so strong. It does a lot of damage in and of itself. This is at rank 3, mind you. It gives you a haste buff as well, up to 10% at rank 3. It gives you a damage buff as well, 5% damage. This is just a really, really powerful trait, and none of the others really stack up to it when it's at rank 3. Now, if you don't have that at rank 3, running something like Lucid Major or Focusing Iris is a very powerful choice as well. This all comes down to what you're simming best as, but if you have rank 3 Condensed, it's pretty safe to say that's going to be your best no matter what. Now, minors, it gets a little bit more interesting. When it comes to your minor traits, more often than not, you're going to see the Memory of Lucid Dreams simming as your highest option. It offers you a lot of resources, and the reason is because if we look at the Lucid Dreams, what it does is your abilities have a chance to refund 50% of the runes that you use. So if you use an Obliterate, you have a 50% chance to refund 1 rune. Now, this procs at approximately 15% rate, so 15% of the time your Obliterate is going to refund a rune. That's on a minor, and also when that happens, if you have rank 3 of this, you get a nice amount of versatility for 8 seconds, which is just straight up damage and a little bit of defensiveness, but mostly the damage. So this is a really, really powerful choice as your minor. I highly recommend running it. Obviously sim yourself, but this is a safe bet that this will sim as your highest. Just double check. Now, if you do have your 3rd slot, which as of now, very few people do, but if you do, what you're going to see in your sims a lot of time is Crucible Miner is not going to out-sim your World Vein Miner, but the thing about World Vein Miner is not only a lot of people that have the new slot not running it because it's actually kind of difficult to run with. It doesn't have 100% uptime, but also a big thing about it is it just isn't as consistent as Crucible. Crucible Miner is just a straight damage proc. Now obviously test this out for yourself, sim yourself and everything. Maybe by then we'll have a definite answer on whether World Vein Miner is better or not than Crucible Miner. I'm not going to say for sure, but right now play around with it, sim yourself, do all that to find out what is the best for you. Alright, so now we're in game, and I'm going to be going over some of the stuff that now can actually be shown in game and makes my life a little bit easier to do that. And this section is called Special Gear. Now, Special Gear is mostly the stuff you really want to go for in the Palace of Azura. Now, obviously, use the Drop Itemizer tool on raid bots. It will allow you to really find out what is the biggest upgrade for you. But I'm going to be talking about this Special Gear so you guys know that it's actually good and know that you should trust the Sims when it comes to this. Now, the first item I'm going to be going over is Lady Ashvane, and that is the Ashvane's Razor Carl. Now, what you're going to see in this is I'm actually going to recommend 2 on-use trinkets because they're the best options, and that's the Font of Power and the Ashvane's Carl. And that may seem kind of stupid to run 2 on-use, but we had the same thing with Unholy and BOD, and, you know, we have the same thing now. They keep making very strong on-use trinkets with not very good passive proc trinkets. So this is just the world that we live in currently. Now, when it comes to this trinket, it's really strong. It's really, really strong. You can look on Blood Mallet, it sims far above anything else, and in Sims, it'll sim far above anything else, which is kind of nice, you know. But this is a really strong trinket. I'll teach you how to use it later on in the rotation section or in the advanced section that I'm going to have later. This is a really powerful option, though. Orgazoa, Ink Pod, it's not as good as Font of Power when it comes to actual performance, but it's still a very strong option. Obviously, sim yourself. Obviously, it depends on the fight and everything. There are a lot of options, not options, but a lot of variables when it comes to this. And obviously, with Ink Pod, it depends on how the fight goes. So, for instance, if your guild is trying to get a 2-shield Ash Vein kill, the Ink Pod loses a lot more value because you're not able to use one of these shields to continue to stack it up, and it's going to do significant less damage. It just depends on how short the fight is. And when it comes to farm and when farm gets really crazy, this trinket, it's probably going to lose some value in my mind, and that's my opinion, so that's me feeling crafting. So if that isn't true, don't castrate me for it. Now, Queen Azura, Font of Power, amazing trinket. It seems annoying to play with because you have this 4-second period where you're just standing there, and if you get something that makes you move, forces you to move, and you have to cancel the channel, you just lose any time spent on it. I believe it channels at about 7 seconds per 1 second of channeling, so you gain 7 seconds of the buff for every 1 second. So let's say you can only get 2 seconds of the channeling, and you're only getting about 15 seconds of the effect. So you really want to be careful with this, and on your second option, or second use of this, you really want to make sure that you're using at a safe period where you're not going to be forced to move, or a time where you're not going to get chosen for a mechanic that forces you to move and cancel this effect. Now, the last one is Zakul, and that is, I'm currently on the Unholy filter, Dream's End. This axe is amazing because not only does it have stats on it, but it also has a very powerful effect. So when it comes to weapons like Gatuku that take away the secondary stats for a really powerful effect, this has the secondary stats and a very powerful effect. It increases your attack speed. That's really good. Auto attacks do a lot of damage right now. This is very powerful. This is an axe you really want to go for. It's much better than the first boss axe. Not crazy better because they both have good stats on them. They're both strong weapons, but this effect, it's just a really nice bonus that you definitely want to get. And thank God I have one, so I don't really have to worry about it anymore, but this is a weapon you really want to go for. And again, sim yourself, really make sure you're coining the correct bosses. Use the drop itemizer to find out what Azurite gear you should be going for in the vendor. So now let's go over Benthic Gear. It deserves its own section all to itself. Let's start. So the Benthic pieces you want to go for are the bracers, the gloves, the belt, and the boots. Now there are 2 belts you want to go for, and that is the Vim's Scale Crusher Girdle and the Zangier Scale Guard Great Belt. Now the reason you want the Great Belt is because it adds 2% damage to aberrations in Najatar and Eternal Ballast. Now what are the aberrations that you're going to be using this on? Orgazoa and Zakul. Those 2 bosses and the adds on it are aberrations, meaning basically wearing this is a 2% damage increase for you. So why would you not use it? That's very strong. That's more than the damage you get from this belt, so there you go. And the bracers, frost damage, just deals frost damage in a proc. Now, this does not scale with your mastery, so don't even think about it. The gloves, now, you can't get many gloves, but these are the only DPS gloves you can get, so there's no negotiate. I think actually you can get a different pair of gloves. I'm not 100% sure on that, but these are the gloves you want to go for. The Powen's Deep Sea Handguards, very powerful gloves. They just send out droplets that deal frost damage. Again, they don't scale with your mastery. These kind of item effects do not. This just deals physical damage, and obviously a threat, like I said before, you don't need to worry about it. And the boots are the coolest ones. They increase your damage you deal with critical strikes by 3%. And that might not seem like a lot, but as a Frost DK, you're critting a decent amount with Killing Machine. So, and you're also running Carl, which Carl, yeah, I say Carl, so whatever. Carl is giving you a significant amount of crit as well, and usually you're going to have around 20 or so % crit if you're at around 430. It just depends personally, but these boots are really good regardless. So now we have the talent section. Now when it comes to the talent section, it's going to show the main build that you're going to run for this, but also I'm going to talk about some alternative talents that you can run in this. Now obviously we're going to start with the 56 row, and it's a perfect start because that is a row where one talent is locked in. The other two are never run as alternatives. Cold Heart, I don't really have to explain why this is so good, but I guess I will for those who are new. This is ridiculously powerful, this talent. It's so strong because it synergizes so well with the new version of Pillar of Frost. Depending on how many Icy Citadels you have, you can sync it up with a Fallen Crusader as well. Now with Font of Power, our pillar phases are even stronger. Not every one of them, but the ones where you have your breath up, those are even stronger. This is just a really powerful talent. It really is. So this is the obvious choice. Now when it comes to the 57 tier, Runic Attenuation, it's your best option. Now the other two are in some ways, quote, viable, but they just don't generate as many resources, and not just generate as many resources, they're not as consistent as Runic Attenuation. When it comes to Murderous Efficiency, it's a good talent, but it's too RNG compared to Runic Attenuation, which is so much more consistent. But then we get to Horn of Winter, which is the most consistent because it's on-demand resources, right? So why is that compared to Runic Attenuation? But I also said that Runic Attenuation is one of the smoothest ones, and Horn of Winter is not very smooth. You have to use a GCD on it. It's a 45-second CD now instead of a 30-second CD, and it may seem like it's balanced out being worth a global by also generating you 25 runic power, but it just doesn't equal out very well because it's also a global that doesn't directly deal very much damage. It's just not nearly as good, especially because the Frost Kit is now so much faster thanks to the Gathering Storm Haste build becoming stronger. Now I'm going to skip over the 58 tier because it's a utility tier. There's nothing to really go over with it. I'm going to do the same with the 75 tier. You can really run whatever you want in those tiers. You can see what I'm running now. That's what I usually run: Asphyxiate and Wraithwalk. Sometimes you run Death Pact. Sometimes you run Permafrost. This, I just always run Asphyxiate though. Now the 60 tier, Frozen Pulse is your main single target talent. Although there are situations, especially Mythic Plus, where Frost Scythe is your best choice. Frost Scythe is amazing. As I spoke about earlier, Frost Scythe is the only ability that you can use to spread your Razor Ice onto off targets, making it amazing for Mythic Plus. Let's say, even if I'm not using my Breath, I'm using my Remorseless Winter on AoE packs, every single AoE pack, and having the ability to get a 15% frost damage increase on all the targets that I'm attacking with that Remorseless Winter and with my Rhyme procs and with my whatever else. It's so powerful. It really is. And that is why Frost Scythe is so strong. And that's also why you put your Razor Ice on your main hand here. Always do that. Don't forget to put it on your main hand. I've seen people do the opposite, and they wonder why Frost Scythe doesn't work as well. I've seen that happen. Don't do that. Avalanche, it's just not as good in Mythic Plus as Frost Scythe. I used to be a fan of it and try to make it work, but it just isn't as good as Frost Scythe. It really isn't. Even if you're running Frozen Tempest and getting a ton of Rhyme procs, it just hasn't been as good. Just hasn't. So it's a shame because it's a kind of a cool talent because it interacts with one of your traits so well, but it just doesn't compare. Now, the 90 tier, this is one where you can still have some choice, but one talent has become so much better, not so much better, so much better than it was, and so strong that it just feels so good to play with that I can't not recommend it. And that's Gathering Storm. It plays so smooth now. When you are running Gathering Storm, and let's say you are running a stat build that you previously had, which was crazy high crit mastery in some verse, and next to no haste, sometimes even no haste. Some people actually got to no haste. Well, what you're going to find if you sim yourself and you were in that situation is haste is going to sim a lot higher, because this build wants a decent amount of haste. If you're questioning that, this is my stats right now with this build, and my stat weights are about all the same right now, and that's at 21% haste. What I've kind of found is it stops becoming very valuable after 20% for me, and that might just be for me. I could just be feely crafting here, but I've seen some other people say that now at around 20% things stop, so there might be something there. I'll just stop myself there before I start feely crafting, and before I'm told that, oh, this has been known, everyone knows this, so I'll just, quit while I'm ahead. Now, Frostworm's Fury, it's still viable, absolutely. If you are going to run this over Gathering Storm, you're probably running the old heavy crit haste verse build, very low, or heavy crit mastery verse, not haste, and running low haste if you are running this talent, because haste is way less valuable without Gathering Storm, and I'll explain that later. And if you are, that's fine. There are instances where this is really strong. I know for some pulls, Naga was using this on Ajara to burst down the ads. I believe he later switched to Gathering Storm for the increased single targets, but it has its niches. I know on the last boss of Atal, it deletes certain packs of those Soul Rend ads, so there are instances where this is a lot of fun. It was amazing with Reaping, but Unholy was so strong that you never really got to run Frost anyway. Still a strong talent though, competitive, just warrants a completely different build than Gathering Storm. And Glacial Advance is bad, don't run it. Now, I don't really have to go over the 100 tier because the video is named the Breath of Sindragosa Guide, so yeah, Breath of Sindragosa. So now we're on to the opener section, and I only have one pair of drums, so we really have to make this work on the first try. Now, how it works, and I'm going to put a diagram on the screen right now, is you're obviously going to start with channeling your Font's Power if you have it, pre-pull at about 5 seconds. Then you'll get a potion in at 1 second, and here let me just move this to a more active button so I can actually press it. Then you're going to pot at 1 second, then Lust is going to happen, then you're going to pop your Guardian, go in with your Obliterates, and then you're going to Empower, Pillar, Breath, and then proceed with your rotation. So let me show it here. So I'm going to start channeling my font, and I'm going to be ready with my potion, that, Lust, Guardian, and then start. Use any Rhyme procs that I get into Howling Blast, pop my Remorseless, and go in with my rotation. Now, if you're high on Runic Power, you don't, and then my Carl's off CD, you actually don't want to use your Obliterate if you're too high on Runic Power, because you're actually going to overcap, and that's just wasted Runic Power. So you want to be careful with that, and when you're actually low on your Runic Power, and then my breath ended there. 29-second breath is phenomenal. That's nothing to scoff at, and actually after your breath, your Carl's off CD, you're not going to press it. You're going to save it for your next Breath of Sindragosa, and you're going to use your Font of Power 10 seconds before your pillar comes off, because you're going to be saving your breath for your third pillar, and you're going to font 10 seconds before pillar comes up. Then you're going to pop your CDs, and then the moment Carl is available after you popped your Font of Power, you're going to use it. And that is the rotation. It's a very simple rotation, does a lot of damage. 551k on breath is nothing to scoff at. If you are a little bit luckier than I am, or a lot bit luckier, you can get upwards of 35 to 40 second breaths. It is entirely possible. This is a very strong build currently, and it's actually getting a buff on Tuesday, so it's going to be even stronger. Yay. Now, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give it a like. And I'm also going to be doing an advanced Frost guide, which is going to be going over certain niche things like how to optimize your Cold Heart, how to optimize your Gathering Storm, a bunch of other things that I will be going over in a separate video. I just don't want to overload people with information. This is more to get people caught up on how Frost DK has really changed. And I'm also going to be releasing a meme build ice cap guide later this week for all those who want to mess around with that. It's a lot of fun. And next week I'm going to be trying to get out the Unholy guide as well. And if Biceps decides not to do an Unholy Mythic Plus guide or something like that, maybe I'll look at doing that. I'm not sure. But just shout out to the Death Knight community. And if you guys need a community that is very fun and supportive, I'm going to put a link to the Discord down in the description. I'm always there if you want to ask me questions or anyone else. There are some of the smartest people that play Death Knight in there. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.